Kind people, they're the easiest to underestimate. You see them smiling, helping, nodding. They apologize when you step on their foot, and you think, oh, they're harmless. But kindness is not weakness, it's restraint. Let me explain something, slowly. I know, I disappeared. Too long. No uploads, no voice. Life happened. Pressure happened. But I'm here now, because this topic isn't psychology, it's survival. In the next 47 minutes, you will understand the hidden mechanism, why the kindest person in the room can become the most dangerous the moment they are finally done. Most people explode when hurt. Kind people, they absorb. They rationalize. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe I'm overreacting. But every ignored boundary, every dismissed feeling is stored. Like data, like evidence. And here's the part you miss. They were listening the whole time. They learned your triggers, your habits, your excuses, because they were patient enough to watch you repeat them. That patience doesn't vanish, it flips. It becomes precision. If you watched my last motivational video about this same kind of nice, the one where I explained how kindness gets harvested until it turns cold, you'll know the pattern. If you didn't, I hid it for you on purpose. Check the description or the first pinned comment. Go there, watch it, then come back here. Yes, come back. I want you returning with sharper eyes. And listen to me, you do not leave this video halfway. Not now, not later, not after the first good line. You watch to the last second, because the last second is the key. If you can't handle it right now, save it, bookmark it, and return when you're ready. You think danger is rage. No. Rage is loud, predictable. Real danger is silence with a plan. When a kind person is done, they don't fight. They remove access. Stop explaining. Stop saving you. 3 signs. Shorter replies, slower forgiveness, and eyes that don't ask anymore, only confirm. Now, let's begin the breakdown. As always, close your eyes and focus with me. Firstly, this switch doesn't happen because the kind person suddenly becomes evil. It happens because they finally stop protecting you from the consequences of who you've been to them. Here's the insane part people miss. Kindness is often a system, a daily discipline, a self-control routine, a private code. They wake up and choose patience like armor, not because they can't fight, but because they can. And that's why the moment they're done is terrifying, because they don't lose control, they gain clarity. Let me break it down with a living example. You know that person who always answers fast, always shows up, always explains themselves, always gives you the benefit of the doubt? You get used to it. So you start doing small things. You cancel late. You reply cold. You joke a little too sharp. You push a boundary and pretend it's nothing, and they still smile. So your brain learns a dangerous lesson. They will tolerate it. That's not love. That's training. And you trained them to disappear. Because inside a kind person, a silent tally is building. Not revenge, not hatred, a pattern map. What you do when you're stressed, what you do when you're jealous, what you do when you feel powerful, what you do when you think nobody will leave. They don't just feel it, they record it. And the more intelligent the kind person is, the more detailed the map becomes. Then comes the moment that ends everything. It's rarely a big betrayal. It's usually something small, but final. A disrespect that confirms the pattern. A sentence that reveals the truth. A look that says, "You don't value me." And in that second, they don't explode. They lock in a decision. From that moment on, you're not dealing with a nice person anymore. You're dealing with someone who has already accepted, I do not need you to understand. I need you to be gone. And here's why they become the most dangerous when they're done. Because they stop reacting and start executing. They don't argue, they don't beg, they don't explain. They quietly remove access to their time, to their help, to their warmth, to their forgiveness. And you feel it like a power outage. Suddenly, the messages are shorter, the eyes are colder, the patience is gone. You try to trigger the old version of them, and it doesn't work. Because that version was a choice, and now the choice is over. Stay with me, because secondly is where it gets worse. I'm going to show you the exact psychological threshold that flips the brain from empathy into detachment, using real-world examples you've seen 1,000 times, but never understood. Secondly, what makes them dangerous is not rage. It's the moment their empathy stops being a bridge and becomes a filter. A kind person doesn't just feel pain. They translate it into rules. At first, the rule is soft. They didn't know better. Then it tightens. They know, and they don't care. And then the final rule appears, quiet, cold, irreversible. This will happen again. That last rule changes everything. Because the brain stops asking, how do I fix this? And starts asking, how do I prevent this? That is the threshold. Not when they cry, not when they shout, not when they threaten to leave, no. The threshold is when they stop imagining a future where you change. You can actually see it if you're paying attention. They stop correcting you. They stop explaining what hurt them. They stop trying to make you understand their point of view. People mistake that for peace. It's not peace. It's preparation. And here's the part that feels almost unfair. When a kind person is still attached, they warn you. They soften the truth. They hide the sharp edges of your behavior from you. But once the threshold is crossed, they stop protecting your self-image. They don't need you to admit anything. They don't need closure. They don't need a confession. They only need distance. So the danger becomes surgical. They don't attack loudly. They remove supply, the attention you fed on, the forgiveness you used as insurance, the emotional access that made you feel safe. And you notice it in small humiliations first. Your jokes don't land. Your excuses don't work. Your silence doesn't scare them anymore. Because they're no longer negotiating. They're observing you, the way you observe a storm from indoors. If you've ever seen someone keep smiling while their eyes go blank, that's not them being strong. That's them leaving you mentally while still standing in front of you. And once they leave mentally, everything you do afterward is late. You can apologize, you can beg, you can suddenly become better. But the internal system has already updated. Risk detected, access revoked. A kind person who is done doesn't want revenge. They want peace. And they will get it, even if they have to become unfamiliar to you. Now think about this carefully. If the threshold is belief, what happens when belief dies? That's where the next layer starts. Not what they do to you, but what they stop doing for you, and why it breaks people faster than anger ever could. And if that question just made your stomach tighten, good. That means your mind is starting to recognize the pattern before it becomes your reality. Thirdly, the most dangerous moment is not when they cut you off. It's the moment they stop needing you. Because kindness, for many of them, was tied to identity. I'm the one who holds things together. I'm the one who understands. I'm the one who stays. So when they detach, they don't just leave a person, they leave a version of themselves. And that's why the change feels unnatural to you, like a glitch, like you're talking to the same face with a different soul behind it. Here's what happens inside the mind. They begin to experience you as a pattern instead of a person. Not someone I love, not someone I'm trying to save, just a predictable cycle. And once a human becomes a cycle, the emotional attachment collapses. Because empathy requires possibility. It requires the hope that tomorrow can be different. When that hope dies, they become precise. They stop giving you explanations because explanations are still intimacy. They stop giving you reactions because reactions feed the pattern. They stop giving you access because access is how you repeat the same damage. People confuse this with coldness. No, this is control. This is a person who finally understood every time I stay kind while being disrespected, I teach them that disrespect is safe. And they refuse to teach that lesson anymore. Now watch how it shows up in real life. They don't block you immediately. Sometimes they don't even argue, they just delay. Replies become slower. Words become smaller. Emotion disappears from the sentence. Almost polite, almost normal, but the warmth is gone. And when you try to pull the old version back, you might raise your voice, you might guilt them, you might suddenly offer promises, you might even accuse them of changing. And here's the cruel comedy. They don't deny it. They just look at you like, yeah, I changed because I learned. That's the danger. A kind person who learns doesn't forget. They remember your timing, your excuses, your fake apologies, your cycles of effort followed by comfort, followed by neglect. They can predict you, and prediction kills emotional fear. So your manipulation stops working. And if you've ever seen someone stay calm while you're getting angry, while you're pushing buttons, raising the pressure, and they just keep that blank composure, that's not weakness. That's superiority. That is a person who no longer needs an outcome from you. They don't need your apology to feel okay. They don't need your attention to feel whole. They don't need your love to feel valuable. And once someone reaches that state, they can walk away without shaking. They can cut ties without drama. They can end things with a smile, because the ending already happened inside them weeks ago. Now let that sit in your chest for a second, because the next step, what comes after detachment, explains why some people don't just leave, they return different, sharper, quieter, and impossible to control. Fourthly, their danger becomes invisible because it's not loud behavior. It's absence used as a weapon. Most people think power is pressure, arguments, threats, volume. No. Real power is what happens when someone removes what you depended on without announcing it. A kind person usually gives too much. Reassurance when you're unstable, patience when you're disrespectful, understanding when you're careless, loyalty when you haven't earned it. So your brain gets addicted to their stability, and addiction creates entitlement. You start thinking their presence is a law of nature. They'll answer, they'll forgive, they'll stay, even if you shrink them, even if you drain them, even if you make them feel small and call it love. But when they're done, they don't take revenge by attacking you. They take revenge by stopping the supply that made you feel in control. They stop validating your excuses. They stop saving your image. They stop covering for you. They stop absorbing your chaos. And what does that do? It forces you to face yourself. That's why people panic. Not because the kind person becomes cruel, but because the mirror turns on. Now pay attention to how this plays out. You send a message you know usually gets a fast reply. This time, nothing. Not a dramatic silence, not a "we need to talk," just nothing. And that nothing is louder than any insult, because your nervous system starts filling the silence with fear. Did I lose them? Are they done? Is someone else in their life? Do they hate me? You start spiraling, and you do what most people do when their control is threatened. You test boundaries. You send another message, then another. You pretend it's casual, then you pretend it's a joke. Then you suddenly become poetic. And the kind person, they don't bite. They've already learned your pattern. They recognize the cycle. Neglect to silence, to panic, to effort, to comfort, to neglect again. So they break the cycle at the only point that actually matters. They don't reward panic with access. This is why their absence feels dangerous. Because it's disciplined, because it's consistent, because it's not emotional, it's policy. And when someone turns their relationship with you into policy, you can't charm them back. You can't guilt them back. You can't pressure them back. You can only respect the boundary or crash into it. And that crash, that's when people reveal who they really are. They insult, they blame, they call the kind person cold. They accuse them of being heartless because they can't admit the truth. They miss the benefits, not the person. A kind person who's done sees that clearly, and once they see it, they don't negotiate with it. They remove themselves from it. Now, let that settle. Because the next layer explains something darker, why some kind people don't just leave quietly. They start enforcing boundaries in a way that feels like punishment, even though it's simply the first time they've ever chosen themselves. Fifthly, when they finally choose themselves, it can feel like cruelty to anyone who benefited from their self-neglect. That's the paradox. A kind person setting boundaries looks mean only to people who were comfortable crossing them. Because for a long time, their kindness wasn't just kindness. It was permission. Permission for you to be careless. Permission for you to be inconsistent. Permission for you to take more than you return. And if you're honest, you can recognize it. The moment they stop bending, your world starts bending. The moment they stop rescuing, your problems start having weight. So people don't react to the boundary. They react to the loss of advantage. That's why the first thing many people do isn't respect. It's negotiation. They try to bargain for the old version back. They bring gifts. They send long messages. They apologize with beautiful words. And sometimes it even sounds sincere. But there's a detail that exposes everything. When the kind person doesn't melt, the apology turns into irritation. Why are you acting like this? Why are you being cold? I said sorry. See it? If the remorse was real, it wouldn't need a reward. If the love was real, it wouldn't demand immediate access. A kind person who is done understands that. So their boundaries become firm. Not loud, firm. They stop arguing the same point. They stop reopening the same wound. They stop letting your urgency control their peace. And here's where the danger becomes personal. Because the kind person starts doing something you are not prepared for. They start matching reality. No more softening, no more protecting your feelings from your actions. They become honest in a way that is quiet, direct, and merciless. Not merciless because they want to hurt you, but because they finally refuse to hurt themselves. And when you realize you can't manipulate them back into softness, that's when some people show their true face. They try to punish the kind person for changing. They shame them. They spread stories. They rewrite history. I was the victim. They were the problem. It's almost funny how predictable that becomes. But the kind person? They don't defend themselves the way they used to, because they're no longer auditioning for your approval. They don't need to be understood by someone who never listened. And once you understand this layer, you'll recognize why the most dangerous kind people aren't the ones who explode. They're the ones who stay calm while they detach and let your behavior speak for itself, until even you can't unsee it. There's still one more step after this, and it's the step that explains why, once they're done, they don't go back, even when you finally become the version you promised to be. Sixthly, once they detach, they don't miss you the way you expect. They miss the idea they carried, the version of you they kept trying to reach. And that's why your comeback attempt fails, because you're trying to revive a relationship while they're grieving a fantasy. Most people think closure is a conversation. No. For a kind person who's done, closure is a decision. A private moment where their mind finally says, I've collected enough evidence. I've tried enough times. I've lost enough sleep. That decision creates something stronger than love. It creates certainty. And certainty is the hardest thing to manipulate. Look at the pattern. When they still cared, they were persuadable. A few sweet words, a few tears, a dramatic apology. They would soften because their empathy was still active. But after detachment, empathy becomes selective. They don't respond to urgency anymore. They don't respond to guilt anymore. They don't respond to your "I changed" speech anymore. Because their brain rewired one simple rule. Change that arrives only after consequences is not change. It's negotiation. So the moment you finally become consistent, they don't celebrate. They evaluate. Not, do I love them, but do I trust the pattern to stay different? And trust is built by time, not by emotion, not by a paragraph, not by a late-night confession. This is why they look calm while you're panicking, because they already endured the hardest part, the internal withdrawal. Their nervous system is no longer addicted to your attention. Their heart is no longer waiting for your best version to arrive. So your presence doesn't spike them. Your silence doesn't scare them. Your anger doesn't control them. In fact, your anger starts to look small to them. And when you realize you can't move them emotionally, that's when people do something desperate. They try to provoke a reaction. They poke, they accuse, they bring up old memories. They throw words meant to reopen the bond. They'll even say the wildest thing. You never cared. Because if they can make the kind person defend themselves, they can pull them back into the old role. But the kind person who's done, they don't defend, they don't chase, they don't explain. They let the silence carry the truth. And that silence is not empty. It's full of everything they finally understood. Now, notice what your mind is doing right now. It's replaying faces, moments, messages. That one small disrespect that wasn't small. Good, because the final layer is the one that separates cold from dangerous. The moment they stop being kind as a personality and start being calm as a weapon. Seventhly, they don't just become calm, they become unreachable. And that's the part that breaks people. Because you can argue with anger, you can negotiate with sadness, you can even manipulate guilt, but you can't negotiate with a mind that has already accepted the loss. Here's what unreachable really means in dark psychology. It means they no longer need your reaction to regulate their emotions. They used to get relief from your attention, or reassurance from your apologies, or hope from your promises. Now, their relief comes from distance. So the old buttons stop working. You send the long message, no reply. You send the "I miss you," nothing. You send the guilt bomb, "After everything I did for you," and they don't even flinch. Because they've seen that sentence before. Not once, not twice, enough times that it became a pattern. And once something becomes a pattern, it loses its power to confuse them. This is where the danger becomes psychological. They stop being a person you can pull back into chaos. They become a wall. Not a loud wall, not a dramatic wall, a quiet, disciplined wall. And when you hit a quiet wall, your mind starts doing something ugly. It starts escalating. You try charm first, then sadness, then promises, then the mask slips. You accuse, you insult, you try to rewrite history, and they watch it calmly. Because the escalation answers the question they never asked out loud. Was I imagining it, or was I being used? When they were kind, they doubted themselves. They softened conclusions. They blamed their sensitivity. But now they observe your behavior under pressure, and pressure reveals character. So the unreachable phase is the final test you didn't know you were taking. If you respect the boundary, you prove you valued them. If you escalate, you confirm you valued access. And once they confirm that, they don't hate you, they don't rage, they don't even argue. They simply update the file in their head. Not safe, not worth it, not my problem anymore. That's why their calm feels like a weapon, because it forces the truth out of people without a single fight. And if you've ever wondered why some kind people become cold enough to walk past you like you're invisible, it's because in their mind, the relationship already ended the day they became unreachable. And after that, all you're doing is speaking to a door that has already been locked from the inside. Eighthly, after they become unreachable, something even darker happens. They begin to reclassify you. Not as someone I love, not as someone who hurt me, but as a lesson. And once a human becomes a lesson in someone's mind, they stop being emotionally special. That is why the kind person looks calm when you finally panic. Because you're not triggering love anymore. You're triggering memory, pattern, data. And data doesn't cry. Here's what this looks like without anyone saying it out loud. They stop romanticizing you. They stop making excuses for your behavior. They stop editing the story to make you look better. They remember the small things you thought were invisible, the jokes that were disrespect, the silence you used as punishment, the last-minute cancellations, the "I'm busy" that somehow never included them, the apologies that arrived only after consequences. And what makes this phase dangerous is that it's not emotional, it's logistical. They start removing you from their future the way someone deletes a corrupted file. No drama, no speeches, just quiet edits. Contacts muted, access reduced, information limited. You realize you don't know their life anymore. You don't know their plans. You don't know what they're thinking. That uncertainty feels like torture, because the old version of them used to explain everything. They used to give you clarity. They used to keep the door open. Now, the door isn't slammed. It's simply no longer yours. And the mind of the person on the other side, it's already in a different season. People call that cold, but cold is still emotional. This is something else. This is the quiet confidence of someone who finally understands, I survived you. And once they taste that survival, they start building a life that does not include your chaos. They stop responding to urgency. They stop responding to nostalgia. They stop responding to the version of you that shows up only when you're losing them. Because they've learned the rule that changes everything. If someone values you only when you withdraw, they never valued you. They valued access. That realization hardens them in a way love cannot soften. Not loud anger, no, controlled anger. The kind that doesn't scream because it doesn't need to. And if you've ever watched someone become so quiet that it feels like you're talking into empty air, that's not them ignoring you. That's them protecting their peace like it's sacred. And what comes next is the final transformation most people never recover from. The stage where they stop being kind by default and start being kind only to those who prove they deserve it. Ninthly, after they reclassify you as a lesson, they develop something rare: selective kindness. Not the soft, open kind of kindness that gave everyone access, but a disciplined kindness with locks on it. This is where people get confused, because they see the kind person smiling again, helping again, being warm again, just not with you. And that contrast is what feels dangerous, because it proves the coldness wasn't their personality. It was your pattern meeting their boundary. Now their mind operates like a filter, who respects me, who drains me, who listens, who uses me. And the moment someone shows a familiar behavior, dismissal, entitlement, manipulation, the door closes instantly. No debate, no second chance marathon, no maybe they didn't mean it. because they already paid for that mistake once. This is the psychological upgrade. When they were kind to everyone, they were running on hope. Hope that people would be fair. Hope that love would be reciprocated. Hope that patience would be respected. Hope is expensive. So now they run on proof. Proof is cheaper. Proof is safer. Proof doesn't break your sleep at night. And if you've ever wondered why some kind people become brutally honest, it's because honesty is the fastest boundary. It saves time. It saves energy. It saves dignity. They stop sugarcoating. They stop over-explaining. They stop trying to be nice at the cost of their self-respect. Their kindness becomes precise, given to those who deserve it, removed from those who test it. This is why, when they're done, they look almost unstoppable, because they no longer waste emotional resources on the wrong people. And that makes them stronger than before. Not louder, stronger. They learn to leave early. They learn to say no. They learn to let people misunderstand them. They even learn to disappoint people and sleep peacefully. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Some of you don't fear dangerous people. You fear disciplined people. People you can't guilt. People you can't confuse. People you can't pull back into chaos. A kind person who has learned selective kindness is no longer easy to control. And that's why it feels like they changed into someone else. But they didn't become someone else. They became the version of themselves that they should have been from the beginning. And there's still one final layer, the last step that explains why, once they're done, they don't just walk away. They become the kind of person you secretly wish you never pushed that far. 10thly, this is the final transformation. They stop being safe and they become certain. Safe people are easy to mistreat because you assume they'll stay soft. You assume they'll forgive. You assume their kindness has no edge. That assumption is convenient. But once a kind person is done, their kindness grows teeth. Not to attack everyone, to protect themselves. They become the most dangerous when they're done because they've learned the 3 truths that end manipulation. First, attention is currency. Second, access is earned. Third, silence can be final. And when those truths lock in, the old games die. Guilt doesn't work, urgency doesn't work, charm doesn't work, anger doesn't work, because control only works on people who still care how you feel about them. A kind person who is done doesn't need to be liked. They need to be respected. So they start moving differently. They listen without explaining themselves. They watch without reacting. They leave without announcing it. And that is terrifying because it removes your ability to manage them. Now here's what makes this ending heavier than all the others. When a kind person is done, they don't just walk away from you. They walk away from the part of themselves that used to tolerate being mistreated. That's why they rarely return. Even if you change, even if you apologize, even if you finally become the version you should have been all along. Because their mind learned something stronger than love. It learned peace. And peace is addictive. Once someone tastes it after years of emotional noise, they protect it like it's oxygen. So if you're watching this and you recognize yourself, maybe you are the kind person who is close to being done. Or maybe you're the one who kept pushing someone gentle because you thought they were safe. Either way, in these 45 minutes, you're going to see the full structure of this transformation, not as a story, but as a system. And once you see the system, you'll start noticing it everywhere. In relationships, in friendships, in family, in work, in every place where nice people are expected to stay quiet. Now, as always, close your eyes and focus with me carefully. Because if you understood even half of what was said, your mind is already replaying names. Good. Let it replay. Not to hate them, to recognize the pattern before it owns you. And now listen. This part is for the ones who are still awake. I don't want nice words in the comments. I want titles. The exact titles you want me to tear apart next. The topics you're too ashamed to admit you relate to. Write it like a confession. The moment I stopped caring. Why silence hurts more than anger. How people use kindness as a resource. The psychology of disappearing without warning. Or something darker. Something specific. Something real. Because I'm going to pick the most repeated titles, and I'm going to turn them into the next videos. Not gently, not politely, clinically. And if you think I'm joking, watch what happens when your title becomes someone else's mirror. Now, here's the unexpected part. In a few seconds, I'm going to go silent. No music, no words, just silence. And if your chest tightens in that silence, that's not because the video ended. That's because you recognized yourself. Now you know.